You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Solana, Doge, and more. Cryptocurrencies and digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity, provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments throughout the world's leading crypto derivatives markets. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Amberdata. If you're entering the digital asset class, you'll need access to granular on-chain and market data from multiple venues to power research, trading, risk management, and compliance. Amberdata delivers comprehensive data and insights into blockchain networks, crypto markets, and decentralized finance, empowering financial institutions to apply traditional finance methods to digital assets. Amberdata eliminates the infrastructure setup, integration challenges, and maintenance headaches to access digital asset data, reducing cost and time to market to enter the digital asset class. Learn more and download their digital asset data guide at www.amberdata.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of crypto derivatives. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back once again. It is Monday. It is 2 p.m. Central. It is 3 p.m. Eastern. Do you know what's going on in the world of crypto? Let's find out together, shall we? It is time once again for the Crypto Rundown. My name, of course, Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as from the network that is not just going strong, but growing, adding a new program in the last month here. Brings us up to nearly a dozen shows. Yes, I'm talking about the Futures Rundown, which, if you're listening to this show, should be intriguing to you because futures playing a growing and important part in the world of crypto. Of course, we had listed futures for a while. There's various other flavors, perpetuals, there's options on said futures. There's a lot of things going on the futures front in the crypto world. So make sure wherever you're listening to this show, if you're for some reason you're not listening to the full network, you should go onto your platform of choice and just search for the network, upgrade to that. Doesn't cost you anything, and it gets you everything you want to listen to out there, including the newest show. And of course, if you want to go above and beyond, you want to get access to awesome pro Q&As. Got another one coming up tomorrow. Options oddities every week. Also, we're coming up to the end of the month, so it's time to get your name in the hat for the Pro Trading Crate. Only one place to go, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. That'll get you all those exclusive shows. That'll get you access to the giveaways, live streams, all sorts of fun, exclusive early content, like a lot of stuff hitting right now from my trip down to the Southern Studio for the Securities Traders Association National Conference. Fun time, as always. You can check all that out early and a whole bunch more. theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go. As we go around the horn, see who's joining us on the old Crypto Rundown program today. I am pleased to welcome back on our old pal, Mr. Greg Magadini, the Director of Derivatives over there at Amberdata. Mr. Greg, welcome back to the show, sir.
Thank you so much, Mark. Happy to be here.
You sound like you're right next to me here in the studio, sir. I love it. I love it. The magic of technology finally shining upon you folks over there in Amberdata land. And how are things in Amberdata since last we chatted, sir?
Well, very exciting. Exciting to get IBIT options pretty soon. That will be a big turning point, I think, for the crypto volatility trading markets. finally get a new inflow of U.S. retail traders and institutional players that I think have been dying to trade this stuff.
Yeah, that's a hot one. So let's get into it then, listeners. A little bit of the old Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, listeners, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown. Of course, the portion of the show where we break down all the action in the world's leading digital asset. Yep, we're talking about the big dog, which is Bitcoin. Coming into showtime, not that dissimilar from what it was this time a week ago. Last time on the show, listeners, 63,439. This week, a whopping 63,336 as we kicked off the show. So down a whopping 103 handles on the week. Did a little bit more living outside of the showtime, of course. I hit its high over the weekend, as Bitcoin tends to do a lot these days. 65,880, so threatening the 66K level. And then coming in for its low in the middle of the week, 63,143. So not quite 3,000 handles on the week out there. We'll get to all that fun in a second. But you kind of hit the nail right on the head there, Greg, as we're kicking off the show. The big development, of course, in the world of Bitcoin, and of course, the big development since the last time you and I chatted, is indeed the approval of the options on the IBIT ETF. Some of you newer listeners might be saying, what's the big deal? But if you've been in the space for a little while, if you've been listening to this show since January at the very least, when Greg and I did that panel back at STA and we were talking about the big thing everyone's looking forward to was Bitcoin options. We had just gotten the approval from the SEC for the ETFs. The next logical step, of course, was, hey, okay, we're going to get the options any day now. And then lo and behold, days, weeks, months went by. No word from the SEC. It was starting to look kind of dire. When I checked in with everybody on the industry side back in Asheville at the OIC conference earlier this summer, it didn't look great. And I just did the same thing just a little over a week ago. I was just down at the STA National Conference, listeners. And one of the things I was checking in on everybody with was the status of Bitcoin options on the approval from the SEC on the ETFs. And you could hear exactly what they all said to me a little over a week ago. And you could judge for yourself just what their outlook was on it. It was not looking great even a little over a week ago, Greg. And then lo and behold, no sooner do I turn off the microphones on the Southern studio a little over a week ago, but that Friday, so a few hours later, the SEC sneaks out their approval of options on IBIT. So I think for a lot of people, they may not realize just how dire things were looking. It did not look like we were going to get these options anytime soon, if ever, Greg. And then lo and behold, bam, they sneak it out heading into a weekend. Maybe that tells you what they think about them. I don't know. But I'm curious for you. You kind of touched on it at the start of the show. What are your thoughts on this? And really, how big of a deal can this be whenever these options are listed for the market, sir?
Yeah, well, I think it's a huge deal because it's IBIT or the spot ETF is just a cleaner product. So if you're trading BitO or BitX, those ETFs that were built on top of the CME futures, well, CME Bitcoin futures trade between 8% to 30% annualized premium to spot, and so you can't even just hold that thing in your retirement account to get Bitcoin exposure because you're always paying a huge sort of contango fee in the futures roll down. And then you have like weird dividends and things like that. So it's kind of this product that consistently grinds to zero, sort of like our favorite vol ETPs. And so it makes it very hard to just get some basic exposure. But now that you have a spot ETF with relatively low fees, sub 1% for the BlackRock ETF, you can actually, buy Bitcoin and hold Bitcoin in a traditional, sort of retirement account. You can hold it as part of your portfolio. It's not this complex products with all these sort of hidden, pricing complexities. And now you can start doing interesting things on top of those holdings. So now that we get the options, you can sell covered calls, you can do cash secured puts, very basic strategies that a lot of traditional players like to play, own the asset, sell the covered call, buy the protective put, things like that. And just to kind of give you an idea of sort of the premiums you can get from selling a covered call, if I look at the September of next year on Deribit, if I was going to sell the 100K covered call, that yields me 14.5%. So, I still have the Bitcoin upside from 63K to 100, and then I'm getting paid 14.5% while waiting. So those are kind of really interesting, high yielding strategies that really this asset class uniquely offers to investors. So I think people are going to want to trade this stuff. And I think we're finally going to get some interesting flows from the Wall Street Bets crowd, from the traditional pension funds who maybe want to allocate a couple percent, things like that. So in my mind, it's a game changer.
14% for the privilege, Greg, of letting a little Bitcoin go at 100K. I think you'd let some go at 100K. What do you think?
Exactly. I mean, that's a 50% rally on the underlying, and you're getting paid 14.5% while you wait for that to happen. And if it doesn't happen, or if it pulls back, you can use that premium to buy more. I mean, there's a bunch of cool stuff you can do. So it's one of those strategies that, allows you to make moves just no matter what happens. There's another move to be made. So I think those types of strategies are really attractive to traditional finance.
People kind of lose sight of it now when everything is shooting to the moon, it seems like. But, 14% is kind of double what you used to be able to reasonably expect from every major index every year, somewhere around 7.5, maybe 8%. So 14% just for a covered call, that's 2x out of the money already. That's not a bad do, as the kids like to say out there. So yeah, interesting stuff. And you kind of bring up a good point as well, Greg. And we've been talking about products like BitO and BitX and all these other things, but the devil is certainly in the details with those products. You have to be comfortable with things like futures, understand how futures work, understand term structure, understand things like roll yield and the impact it could have on those, and understand the impact of those massive distributions and the dividends that products like BitO have. And for a lot of people, it was just maybe too much. I can certainly understand that. The analogy I make a lot, Greg, and a lot of guests have come on the network and done the same thing, is really trading, let's say, on the gold futures or options, or maybe a better analogy would be some of the other products that attempt to replicate positions in gold versus GLD, which actually holds the physical, and they don't suffer from the roll yield as a result because they have a warehouse full of gold. And in IBIT's case, they're actually holding spot Bitcoin, so they're not suffering from what's going on with the term structure and the negative roll yield because they're sitting on a mountain full of Bitcoin at the end of the day. So that's how I view it. Is that how you tend to view it as well, Greg, the GLD analogy?
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy. And I think even more so with Bitcoin, where there is no physical storage costs, there's no necessarily, I mean, there might be insurance costs, but not to the same level where you're insuring a warehouse from, physical theft and things like that, or natural disasters. So the costs of storing, digital money is essentially zero, and it's perfectly portable. So it's just going to be a much cleaner fee structure.
Yeah, you don't have to mess around with negative roll yield and all these things anymore. Those concepts go by the wayside. We had, in fact, just to show you how ridiculous this whole approval thing has been, Greg, we had the Rex Shares folks on the show a week ago. And they were talking about, in the interim, while SEC has been twiddling their thumbs trying to decide whether you should be able to buy a call on IBIT, they filed for and got approved to list 2x and inverse options on IBIT. So you could trade those. You could trade levered options on IBIT, Greg. You could trade inverse on IBIT. You just couldn't trade the one-to-one op. Those were still waiting for approval. That's how crazy things got, Greg, up until a few weeks ago. Isn't that insane?
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Like, it doesn't even sound rational when you hear that. You're like, wait, you can do the 2x, but you can't do the 1x? What are we doing? But that's kind of how lost in the regulatory morass these Bitcoin options became, which is why a lot of people that I was talking to who, when they're not talking to me, spend their days knee deep in the regulatory side, so we don't have to, thankfully, listeners here on the network. They were not that optimistic that we would ever see these things. So all of a sudden, for it to sneak out on a weekend now, that said, they're still not listed, and everybody I talked to, Greg, says there's still a lot of I's dotted and T's need to be crossed, so probably not going to see them in our trading accounts before the end of the year, Greg, so maybe we shouldn't get too excited, but they have been approved, so that milestone has been crossed at least, so I think we will eventually see them, Greg. Whether it's this year, early next year, I don't know, but we will eventually be able to trade an option on a product that holds the quote unquote physical, Greg. So at least that'll let you sleep at night a little bit better, Greg, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be very interesting to see how these flows kind of jump out of the gate here.
Well, what do you say, Greg? We crunch some numbers. There's this little platform you might want to check out, Greg. I think you'll like it. It's called Amberdata. They crunch some skew and vol. Have you heard of it?
Indeed, I have.
All
yes.
right, let's see what they have cooking for us this week, listeners. You can check it out for yourselves, of course. Amberdata.io, the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. Again, we kind of just scratched the surface on the show. It's only really a 1 hour show at the end of the day. We can't spend 5 hours going deep into the shadow term structure. I wish we could. There's so much data here. We really just scratched the surface. Kick the tires for yourselves, listeners. Amberdata.io. The place to go to learn more. If you did that, listeners, if you fired it up today, let's start near dated and work our way out as we are wont to do, listeners, shall we? And looking at the vol, remember I said Bitcoin kind of treading water over the course of the past week. We had a little bit of a range, but nothing crazy. That means vol and skew were kind of treading water this week as well. On the show a week ago, 7-day vol, 47.60. Coming into the start of the show today, about 46 and a quarter. So no huge evolution there. On the 30-day vol front, we actually saw vol firming up a little bit, which is kind of interesting. We had about a 49 on the show last week, so slightly below 50. This week, ticking north of 50, 51.9. So gaining nearly 3 points out there, which is kind of interesting on the 30-day vol front. And then everything coming back to earth on the 6-month vol front. The vol last week, 60.5. This week, the hodlers taking a little bit of a hiatus right now, 59.10. So we're kind of all over the place on the vol front, which again is kind of to be expected as Bitcoin is kind of vacillating all over the place as well, but mostly treading water. Same deal on the skew front, going out to the weekly skew. Last week we had what I would call flat, positive 0.5, no real bias in either direction. This week it is literally flat. There's nothing out there this week. Going out a full month. Last week it was slightly positive bias, positive 1.25. Which, again, I would term mostly flat, but slightly positive bias at the end of the day if you want to be technical about it. And this week, that is coming in as well, 0.75. So, again, I would say mostly flat out there. And going out 6 months, we were at a positive 4 this time a week ago. This week, coming in a little bit at positive 3.5. Mr. Greg, anything catching your eye in the vol and skew data in Bitcoin this week, sir?
Yeah, I think the two really interesting things are we obviously have a huge premium in the November 8th expiration because of the election. So 56% at the money vol. And then the October 25th is 48. So that puts forward vol sort of in the 70 handle. I think it's interesting that October is being sold so heavily. It seems like there's a good argument for the momentum in spot prices to occur going into the election, not necessarily on the event of the election itself. So from that perspective, maybe October is a little cheap. And then, from a election play perspective, things like sell November, buy December types of structures, because the term structure is really flat post November. Those are kind of interesting strategies as well. So I find that to be a little bit enticing. But I think one of the things we have to remember is that in these bullish environments, people often will overpay for that upside. So even though we're having sort of, for the exception of today, but last week we had, a massive 10% return, as the markets drift higher, there's a consistent sort of directional drift. But the vol from day to day goes down. So if we actually look at, say, 7-day vol going back over the past 12 months, today we're at right now we're at the lows. So really 7-day vol over the past 12 months, right now we're about 37 on the realized side. And that's pretty much the annual lows. And so I could actually just see, a drift higher back to all-time highs at a pretty controlled pace. And then once we get past all-time highs, who knows what happens? Then we can actually see some momentum. But I think it's important to keep that in mind so you're not overpaying for sort of that upside optionality going into the election because, there could be just a drift. You might make money on the delta side, but you don't want to necessarily lose money on sort of the vega side of the component. So there's interesting structures that kind of neutralize that. But I think it's just important to keep that in mind. When it's bullish, people will often overpay for that upside.
Yeah, hence 14% for the pars, and we were just talking about a few minutes ago. But I digress, listeners. Let's go out to, speaking of overpaying or perhaps just over trading, let's go out to some of the names you folks like to trade while you're waiting for the IBIT options to make it into your hot little hands out there. Listen, let's go out to BitO again. I wonder what the impact will be, Greg, once the IBIT options are listed on BitO. Is it going to dry up? I don't know. The answer today is certainly no. BitO options are on fire today. The ADV is 85,000 a day. That's actually ticking up 1,000. And right before showtime, it wasn't a heck of a lot going on in BitO. Only 50,000 contracts on the tape, so didn't seem like they were going to hit that today. And then all of a sudden, Greg, BitO has come roaring to life with 250,000 contracts on the tape right now. So I had to go do some digging while you were talking to see what the heck is going on out there. What is lighting it up out there in BitO? And then I realized, we are going ex-div, Mr. Greg. So if you've listened to the show for any length of time, listeners, you know BitO pays a heck of a dividend out there. So if there's a name you're going to try to harvest some dividends in, BitO is probably the one. And that's exactly what we're seeing. Pretty much all of these 200,000+ contracts that are coming in right now are all attempting to harvest that. We got 27,000 of the Nove 15s. Now that's interesting. BitO's 1916. We are in the money. Nove, obviously you're going to see a lot of in the money strikes when you're trying to capture a dividend, listeners. That's still an interesting choice going all the way out to Nove. We got Jan 14s, we got Nove 14s, 18,000, 21,000 of those respectively, 13,000 of the Jan 12s. So they're going to pretty much any strike with open interest and just trying to jam as many contracts as they can through. 12,000 of the June of next year 14s. That's an interesting way to do a dividend capture, going all that way out. You're tying up a lot of excess capital, but I guess maybe they're going where they can find the OI. But either way, Greg, BitO roaring to life, not underlying-wise this week. It's pretty much unched on the week. But volume-wise today, as everyone and their mother, and apparently you too, Greg, are trying to harvest this dividend in BitO.
Yeah, exactly. I think if you're really looking for spot price exposure, BitO is not the tool to do that. BitO is the tool to do some of these pricing, dividend plays, contango plays. You know, if I'm looking at the CME futures basis today, it's at 8.5%. So that's a little bit of a drag. Then you got to include the BitO dividend. Then you got to include the BitO expense ratio, which is 1%. And so you get an underlying price that had a peak of $33 this year in March when Bitcoin was at 70K. And today we're at $19 and Bitcoin's at 64K. And so, you know, that drag is pretty big. It gets paid out in terms of cash. But again, if you're going to sell long dated at the money calls that might be even in the money, no matter what Bitcoin does, you can sort of expect that grind to come through and potentially those, 14, 15 calls actually end up out of the money despite Bitcoin maybe being bullish.
Yeah, the Jan 2026 14s. We don't typically see a lot of div plays going out that far, Greg. It's an interesting choice on an ex-div day, but that's kind of what we're seeing out here. BitO, a very interesting product, and once again, not failing to live up to its reputation today. Let's go out to Greg's preferred vehicle, though, BitX. He loves himself a little bit of levered action on the BitO front. BitX 28 even right before we kicked off the show today. It puts it down about 1.25 points from this time last week. The ADV also ticking up slightly, 19,000 contracts a day. That's up about 1,000. And today they're at about 18,000, so they're right about where you'd expect. The vol also looking a little juicy out here as well, 109, up about 13 points on the week. Greg, anything catching your eye in your favorite crypto product of all time outside of Toncoin, aka BitX?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's the same sort of dynamics. BitX has even more expensive ratio, 1.85, so a 2% drag from the expense ratio, twice the drag from the contango, a little bit less of a dividend, but still a decent dividend. I mean, $3.76 in the past 12 months. All those things create that drag. So, I think in the past shows we've seen deep in the money puts, and that's what people are betting on, is the drag on the underlying price itself.
Let's see what folks are betting on out here in Maryland as well. Not much, listeners. 16 and a quarter, up about a quarter from our last show. We did see Mara pop up into our top 10 most actives on the option block last week, which is kind of interesting. We don't see that too often. So Mara had a little bit of a flirtation with action on the volume front last week. This week, and indeed today, not so much. The ADV is 192,000 now, down about 6,000, but still pretty decent ADV. A lot of names out there would kill to put up nearly 200,000 contracts a day. Today, 165,000. Doesn't seem like they're going to get there today, but again, the day's not over. The vol in 88, so pretty frothy, up about 6 points from where it was this time a week ago. But other than that, not a heck of a lot. Lighting it up out there in Maryland. As we keep on rolling, it is time to explore the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, welcome to the altcoin universe, the portion of the show we break down all the action and everything else outside of the big dog, which is Bitcoin, except for right now when we talk about one of my favorite parts of the show, which is the market cap. And I know Greg's like, just get to the ton coin, get to the ton coin. We'll get there, Greg. Don't worry. It's coming up. Let's look at the top 10 from a market cap perspective, listeners. We saw the overall crypto market cap tick up a little bit this week. We were at about 13.25 billion to break into the top 10 last week. This week, 13.5 billion, listeners. Once again, that gets us to our old pal Tron, holding down the number 10 spot this week, listeners. 13.5 billion with the market cap. Number 9, right above it, Greg's favorite. He can breathe a sigh of relief. It's still in the top 10. It is Toncoin, 14.75 billion worth of market cap. Number 8, Greg's other favorite, which is, of course, Doge. Good old Doge coming in at the number 8 spot. 17.1 billion worth of market cap. Number 7, XRP, because of course it is 35 billion worth of market cap. Number 6, USD coin, 35.6 billion. Number 5, it's Solana, 72.3 billion. Number 4, BNB, 83 billion even. Number 3, it's Tether, 119.6 billion. Number 2, it's ETH, 311, almost 311.5 billion worth of market cap. And the big dog, Bitcoin, about 1.25 trillion worth of market cap, almost exactly where we found it this time on the show a week ago. Let's go around the horn to number 2 on the market cap charts. Number 1 in a lot of your hearts, it is ETH. And looking a little bit lighter this week than it was this time last week. We're at 26.75 on the show last week, 25.80 coming into the show this week, down a whopping 95 handles on the week. And range-wise, not a heck of a lot beyond that outside of our shows. The low was pretty much right after our show last week, 25.80, and then, which is pretty much where we're hanging out again right now. And then the high was last Friday, 26.95. So a little bit of a range, but nothing that outlandish over the course of the week in ETH. Greg, anything catching your eye in ETH this week, sir?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that's interesting about ETH is that it trades a little bit of a vol premium. So if we look at, similar strategies for like the covered call, for example, if I'm selling the 1 year 5,000 call, it gets me 12.5%, and that's exactly 100% out of the money, more or less. And so just kind of interesting stuff you can do there. ETH has a staking yield, so it earns 3% staking rewards. So you could buy, some ETH, stake it, earn 3%. You could overwrite the $5,000 call for the 12.5. So that puts you at 15.5. And you could actually do a 1x2, which you own the ETH and sell 2 of the 5,000s, get 25% plus the staking yield, puts you at 28%. And then your break even is, ETH rallying basically, your short strike is at ETH appreciating 100%. So that gives you a lot of wiggle room. Those are interesting types of strategies to like really maximize the yield component of an Ethereum investment. So that's pretty interesting. In terms of bullishness or bearishness on ETH, I think this asset has a little bit more sensitivity to the election. Bitcoin is going to be driven from macro factors. I think, the way that interest rate cuts going into the end of the year being priced at 75 basis points, so another 50 basis point cut, and another 25 basis point cut. That's obviously all really good for Bitcoin. But for something like Ethereum, where the regulatory landscape affects essentially the development on top of Ethereum, we're talking about DeFi, we're talking about GameFi, we're talking about NFTs, all that stuff. Any sort of negative regulation coming from the election outcome, I think is pretty bearish for ETH. Another thing to keep in mind for Ethereum too is that Ethereum has sort of this diminishing float based on the amount of transaction fees that occur on Ethereum. But Ethereum recently passed this, they call it a blob fee, which is basically if someone creates a layer 2 that settles to Ethereum, you can think of the layer 2 as the ecosystem, and you could say like, every day or every block, the net transactions of the L2 ecosystem then get posted to ETH. Well, that brings transactions off of ETH, and that converts ETH from a deflationary supply to an inflationary supply. So that's kind of bearish. But fundamentally speaking, if everyone's developing on EVM, which is the Ethereum virtual machine, which is the smart contract compiling language, that's long-term bullish, but short-term bearish on price. So there's a little bit of interesting dynamics there that I think are important to keep in mind. So those are kind of the strategies that I would employ if I was investing in ETH, is to try to maximize yield and remember that there's a little bit more of a drag on the price of ETH for the reasons I just mentioned.
Interesting. 1x2 to the upside in ETH out there. You're not too worried about having to tie up extra margin or collateral along those lines. Does that weigh on your decision to go the 1x2 route, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, that really depends where you're trading and how you're covering that unit risk. If you're doing portfolio margin, you can just cover that short unit with a very short dated out of the money option. You could call that like a throwaway insurance policy. If you're trading on Deribit, the margin requirements are so favorable that the tie-up is not a big component.
Yeah, you can take advantage of some of the looser restrictions in the crypto world sometimes if you can trade on Deribit. I know for our U.S. audience, unfortunately, that's mostly a no-go. Let's see what we're seeing out here in the realm of crypto, vol, and skew, shall we, listeners? And we'll start weekly again and work our way out. Last week on the show, 57.60, that was the weekly vol in ETH. This week coming in a little bit, as you might expect, at a 54, so down a little over 3 points. No big earth-shaking change there. On the 1 month front, kind of like we saw in Bitcoin, actually ticking up slightly. 58.25 on the show last week. 59.25 today, so ticking up exactly a point. And then going out to the 6 month vol, we saw the vol last week 71, this week 67 and about a third, so coming in nearly 4 points on the longer term vol. Skew wise, we saw things mostly hanging out, so the weekly skew was kind of flat this time a week ago. This week it has slid slightly bearish, negative 1.6. Nothing crazy at the end of the day, listeners. A monthly skew was kind of flat this time a week ago, negative 0.7 to be precise. Coming in to start a show today, it was almost exactly flat, so no real bias in any direction today. And going out a full 6 months, we were positive 4.3 on the show a week ago. This week, about 3.75. Greg, anything catching your eye in your own vol and skew data, sir?
Yeah, well, I would say the skew data for ETH, really only gets positive past November, but it's pretty much zero. In my mind, that's a really interesting relative vol play between Bitcoin and ETH, kind of given the sensitivities that I talked about around the election. I think there's some stuff to be done there. Long dated stuff, skewed to the upside. I think, who knows how that actually plays out. We've seen years where spot vol regimes, such as 2023, were really negative. And then we've seen years where spot vol regimes are very positive, such as 2021. And so I think this really depends on the election outcome and essentially the regulatory environment to see if that spot vol regime is positive or negative for the next 12 months.
Let's see what's positive or negative in the rest of the altcoin universe, shall we, listeners? Solana last week, 143.61. This week, 154.45, up almost 11 handles, about 10.84 on the week. So nice little pop for Solana. Same deal in XRP, actually ticking up. Go figure. 58.6 cents last week, 61.8 cents today. It's up a little over 3 cents on the week. Musk's favorite, everyone's favorite out there, or maybe you hate it, it's Doge. 10.7 cents last week, 11.7 cents this week, so ticking up a wee bit out there. Litecoin, 67.67 last week, bucking the trend, 66.89 this week, down about 78 cents. Cardano, 35.9 cents last week, 37.8 cents this week's up nearly 2 cents. Polkadot, 440 last week, 451 this week, up a whopping 11 cents. And everybody's favorite, Shiba Inu, a million zeros, 1452 last week. This week, 1773. So can Shiba Lambos be far behind, listeners? I ask you, is this the moment you've all been waiting for in Shiba Land? We've all also been waiting for what else is lighting up Greg's wallet out there in the altcoin universe. Any other interesting altcoin you want to share with the folks, sir?
In terms of altcoins, I think the other one that's still kind of interesting to trade nowadays is Solana. So if you've seen Solana is gaining a lot of price appreciation versus ETH, that's pretty interesting. Obviously, Solana trades at a higher vol. So, if Ethereum is trading short-dated stuff around 58, Solana is trading around 70. That's kind of interesting. There's definitely something to be said about that. So I think that's the other really interesting altcoin, especially because there's options on it. We might get traditional products with traditional options on Solana at some point. So that's pretty interesting as well. So that's the main altcoin that I'm looking at in terms of vol trading.
Not slinging any XRP options yet, sir?
No, I've been around too long. That XRP is like, I don't know if that thing's ever going anywhere.
Yeah, it's kind of easy to be a little skeptical on XRP. But you know what we're never skeptical, listeners, on? It's your questions. So let's get to them now.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, listeners, welcome to the Crypto Questions. And you folks have been weighing in on a ton of crypto-related questions of late. They've been all crypto taking over our question of the week lately, it seems like. So let's get some of your results, and I want to get Greg's thoughts on these as well. Let's start. Last week or so, we asked you folks, hey, Bitcoin, this has kind of been the subject of debate ever since we launched this show, and it still is raging right now. So we thought we'd put it out to you, the audience, at the end of the day to be the ultimate arbiters of this. We said, hey, Bitcoin has lived many lives over the past decade. We now have quite a bit of data under our belts, but the debate still rages. What role does Bitcoin really play in a modern portfolio? We gave you three choices and the infamous other. We said it's digital gold, it's an uncorrelated asset class, it's just another tech allocation, or other, and you folks had a lot of fun and silly and smarmy others, like it's just a crazy lottery ticket or it's a waste of money, all those things. We hear you. You're fun out there on the other side. Other getting 7.7%. But Greg, at the end of the day, our audience couldn't make up their mind. They were pretty much exactly split, which maybe goes to show how divisive this subject still is. They came down pretty much evenly split, about a third each for uncorrelated asset class versus just another tech stock, and then 25.6% for its digital gold. I'm curious for Greg, where do you fall on our spectrum here? And then B, what do you think about our audience kind of evenly split, sir?
Yeah, very interesting. I personally fall in the digital gold landscape. I also view the uncorrelated asset class as a reason to own regular gold, including digital gold, such as Bitcoin. So that's how I view it. I definitely don't view it as a tech stock. I think that the tech stock allocation to me is more the Web3 play, Solana, Ethereum, Tron, whatever you want, where there's Web3 components being built on top of the chain. Bitcoin to me is more of a passive asset, such as gold, that's really used for uncorrelated returns.
Well, our audience having a hard time making up their mind out there these days, listeners. But what they're not divided on, Greg, which I kind of expected, was our question of the week from last week. We said, hey, ask and you shall receive. After months of waiting, the SEC finally approved options trading on IBIT, a.k.a. the ETF we've been talking about pretty much all show, listeners. So we thought we'd put it out to you folks at the end of the day. Are you excited? Do you plan to trade IBIT options when they are listed? Heck yes, hell no, or you prefer something else? You know, your BitOs, your BitXs, those are all equally acceptable answers as well. And Greg, at the end of the day, like I kind of expected, 63.2% of our audience saying heck yes, 31.6% saying hell no. So I think some of the crypto naysayers, they snuck in there at the last minute. It was looking pretty strongly and firmly heck yes until pretty much the last hour or two. So we had some naysayers swinging in there at the last minute, and then 5.3% coming in for the defenders of the BitOs and the BitXs of the world. Greg, what are your thoughts on our audience? Probably not surprising. They're pretty down for IBIT. They want them right now, Greg.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. The heck yes boat, of course. Surprised that there's so many no's. I think trading options, no matter what you think of the asset class, is interesting because you can tailor your opinion however you want. If you don't like the asset class and you're bearish on it, just trade those structures. So I'm surprised on the high percentage of the no's.
You know what it is? We have a guy on our Option Block show who he proudly says he is the owner of BitcoinReallySucks.com, and he talks down crypto whenever he can. So he's poisoned some of our audience, Greg. So I blame him. It's that Uncle Mike fellow who's just talking to the naysayers out there. But you're right.
Nice.
At the end of the day, regardless of what you think about the underlying, if you're an options trader, all you really need is a little volume and a little volatility, right? And you can make up the rest on your own. So it's hard to argue Bitcoin doesn't at least have that. It has some volume, and it certainly has volatility. So whether or not you have complete faith in the underlying is almost immaterial as long as you can get the first two out there at the end of the day. But nonetheless, Uncle Mike naysayers aside, you folks are still looking forward to a little bit of IBIT action. We're all looking forward to it. Yet to have a clear answer. I was talking to some folks last week who were talking to their own because all the different exchanges are trying to get some clarification on this and talking to their own legal teams who talk to the SEC. And it does seem like the approval was kind of just the first step. It was the easy part. There's still a lot of nuances that has to go on behind the scenes. The plumbing, if you will, of the options market. OCC has to set up the facility to clear these. They've been a little bit reluctant on the crypto front in the past. So I'm going to be optimistic, Greg, and say we see him before the end of the year. But, you know, the devil's in the details with all of these. But I hopefully next time you and I chat, we'll have a clearer sense of a timeline for when we'll be able to put some IBIT options in our accounts. In the meantime, Greg, if folks want to put a little Amberdata in their accounts, where should they go? What should they do?
Yeah, absolutely. You can check out our application at pro.amberdata.io. And then we also have a weekly wrap-up letter that talks about crypto ball at amberdataderivative.substack.com.
There you go. Check him out in between his appearances here on the old network, listeners. A lot of great data and a lot of great content coming out of that Twitter profile over there as well, including their newsletter. All kinds of good stuff there. That is going to do it for the good stuff on the network today. Speaking of that crypto naysayer, I'll be back with him in the Pro Q&A hot seat tomorrow, so you can sling your crypto arrows at him tomorrow. Why do you hate crypto so much? Go ahead. It's your Pro Q&A session. You can ask whatever the hell you want, listeners. So if you want to go at him on crypto, then by all means, go for it. TheOptionsInsider.com/pro is the place to go to get access to that and well over 100 other just Pro Q&A sessions. That doesn't even touch on options oddities, well over 100 of those. A whole bunch of exclusive stuff you folks got early and everything else. So a lot of cool stuff over there. TheOptionsInsider.com/pro. We do get into crypto quite a bit on these Pro Q&As, it seems like. So if you're crypto curious, then you might want to check out the Pro as well. Then, of course, back again on Wednesday for the newest doubleheader on the network of the Options Bootcamp show that you all know and love, as well as the new edition, the Futures Rundown, which, dare I say it, we'll probably get into some crypto on that show in the near future as well. Thursday, of course, our usual doubleheader of This Week in Futures Options, as well as episode 2 of the Option Block. Friday, Vol Views, and we're back again for some options oddities until we can rest for the weekend and come back again next Monday, another episode of the Crypto Rundown. Stay safe out there, everybody.
The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Amberdata. If you're entering the digital asset class, you'll need access to granular on-chain and market data from multiple venues to power research, trading, risk management, and compliance. Amberdata delivers comprehensive data and insights into blockchain networks, crypto markets, and decentralized finance, empowering financial institutions to apply traditional finance methods to digital assets. Amberdata eliminates the infrastructure setup, integration challenges, and maintenance headaches to access digital asset data, reducing cost and time to market to enter the digital asset class. Learn more and download their digital asset data guide at www.amberdata.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.